This right here is a teddy bear whose eyes I plucked out as a child at the ass of a much smaller teddy bear. This teddy bear, and potentially the backside of the other one, has informed me that Tencent has invested massive amounts of money into the recent enormous video game flop, Highguard. Or at least that is the rough equivalent of what is currently being reported by Stephen Totillo here. So, let's talk about this a little bit, because there are some interesting things that we can talk about, whilst I also make it very, very clear that this is probably bullshit, let's be fair. But there has not yet been any official statements from Highguard or Tencent on the matter, which is the only reason why I'm willing to credit it with any reliability at all. With Stephen Totillo, of course, being one of the editors over at Kotaku during Gamergate, a man who has turned making things up into basically a living on a paid article as well, so please do take this with a tremendous quantity of salt. But, okay, Tencent funding a game like Highguard. It is far from impossible, as Tencent has for a very long time now attempted to get its little fingers into Western entertainment, and successfully as well through many purchases. For example, they just own Riot Games outright now. And this has been a part of China's wider attempt to push into the Western entertainment market, and specifically to gain access to Western IPs, to make up for the fact that China itself doesn't really have anything internationally recognized. This is a part of a wider Chinese push to begin waging a cultural war against the current cultural hegemon, which is of course the United States of America. Now, buying their way into what was supposed to be a highly anticipated project, as Highguard was indeed supposed to be, would kind of fit in with this general strategy. However, there are some little things wiggling about here and there that makes that not entirely convincing, in my opinion. Highguard wasn't given anywhere near enough of a hype, for example. It wasn't given enough of a marketing budget to really try and lift it up. Even then, the buzz of it, and probably a very, very paid promo at the Game Awards, did give it a fair bit of attention, which saw a lot of people check the game out initially, realize it was utter and complete garbage, and then drop it immediately thereafter, with the game company also basically shutting down with no plans for any future support or DLC. Now, in most cases, even the floppiest of flops gets at least the pretense of continued support. I mean, you have to talk a Concord level flop for something to simply just have the plug pulled immediately, which this sort of kind of is. This does suggest that the Tencent pulled funding very, very swiftly, perhaps even before the game released, in fact, which might also explain the dearth of coverage surrounding it and the immediate push to really bring it up into the public consciousness round around its release time. So, why then, if Tencent was doing this to try and get a leg into the Western market, and they really did believe in this, did they design the game the way they did, with the studiously unattractive characters, etc., with the boring gameplay? Did Tencent just pour millions into this? I think there was a mention of something like 400 million or something, just for shits and giggles? Seems somewhat unlikely, and Tencent knows what sells. China knows what sells. They've determined that very, very securely over the last few years. They get it. They understand fan service, sex, attractive characters, good solid gameplay loops. They've figured all of this out and are building an entire mobile market around this very principle. So why would they do it? Conspiracy theory time here, but there have been, for quite some years, the odd suggestion that China has been pushing certain projects with an eye towards seeing them fail. And I think Highguard might have been one of the biggest ones yet, if not in fact the biggest one, with China establishing a certain Western aesthetic which they are very much so aware nobody actually likes, nobody finds appealing, and certainly nobody actually wants to play for any length of time. then backing it, giving it money, making these programs and projects appear to be financial successes, at the very least within the milieu that these games developers frequent. I mean, can you imagine being at a games developer conference and talking to some of these developers, how much money they're getting, how the money is just flowing into these various projects like Concord? You too would undoubtedly think that, oh, okay, well, fat ugly women are in, I suppose. It keeps the money flowing, so why shouldn't I make that exact same thing? This is a bit of a hangover also from the official funding days, for example, where you had various DEI funds giving out money to developers so long as they fulfilled certain tick boxes. Another thing that has largely disappeared recently because, well, with the slowing down of the global stock markets and the economy in general, money is no longer as free as it once was, and doesn't quite grow on trees in the same prolific quantities as it once did. Investments are getting scarcer and scarcer, and specifically because of a long string of high-profile failures that, I mean, if I was China, yeah, this is kind of exactly what I'd do if I was a Disney villain. Make it appear as if the West has completely lost its fucking mind, and successfully as well, to the point where the majority of the entertainment companies, big and small, genuinely appear to believe that making video games that nobody wants to play is the winning move somehow, relying either entirely on international investment, which will yet further drain the coffers, or make them reliant upon foreign companies like Tencent. And at the end of the day, there really is no loss position here for Tencent. Okay. Highguard takes off, the gameplay is amazing, it becomes a viral success. Now Tencent owns large portions of another extraordinarily successful video game, and having seen the amount of money they've been able to milk out of Riot, yeah, they'd probably be happy to do that. On the opposite flip side, if the game becomes an enormous failure due to its woke programming and generally unattractive women, great. It further cements within the Western gaming market that this is how you're supposed to do things, at least for a little while longer, as the industry very slowly begins to grind around to noticing that these projects simply aren't working anymore. And I'll point out as well, we are basically now seeing like the beginning of the tail end of these projects, as there are still incredibly woke video games in active development right now, and if anything, the development of actual counter-cultural video games, non-woke video games, will have started at absolute most like a year ago, and so we're going to wait another 2 or 3 at least before we actually get to see any of that. And explicitly anti-woke video games? Oh, I don't think we're there yet. I don't think we're there by any stretch of the imagination. As for that to happen, we really need to fully establish the anti-woke culture as the dominant one before anyone will be willing to pour real money into it, especially seeing as China is doing this to tank the market rather than necessarily gain from it. And this also, of course, positions China in a wonderful position as a primary investor and gave it a development developer as well, regardless of what happened. But obviously, all of this is basically conspiracy theory nonsense, and I still do believe that this is probably just an effort to drive some more attention to Stephen Totillo's new little site here, as I have been unable to find a single piece of corroborating evidence of this, and the only real thing that makes me think maybe this could be conceivably true is that it would make sense from the Chinese perspective, and because neither company has actually released an official statement on it. And I can also see why the developers themselves would want to keep this a secret, as if they keep it close that they have been funded by China, well, one, they avoid the negative associations to receiving all of your cash from a communist dictatorship. That is one thing. And 2, it allows them to present themselves as the plucky underdog indie developer, which is something far too many companies are still doing these days, as you can go on Steam right now and search for indie games and find that half of them have fucking publishers, which I do believe is the exact opposite of an indie developer, but details. And of course, if the game was a success, then they could claim all the credit to themselves as the brilliant developers that somehow pulled it off in the face of all the inevitable problems. But, I don't know. I'm still probably leaning majoritively towards bullshit on this, but it's a nice little thought experiment, if nothing else. Anyways, do let me know what you think as well down in the comment section below, as I'd be interested in hearing if my theory holds any weight or water with the general populace which you represent, or if I'm simply just a madman barking at the moon in this case, which could also easily happen, frankly. Still. Until next time, I've been Arch. Thank you very much for watching, and I do hope to see you all again soon. Till then, have a good day.